Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says a budget not for the environment. This article here is speaking about budget allocation with respect to the environment. The author here recollects his conversation with former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Back in the 1990s, India was not doing good with respect to its overall economy. So what did we do? We opened up our economy. With the opening of the economy and with the liberalization, privatization and globalization, India saw expansion when it comes to its economy. We also saw increase in the GDP numbers. We also saw growth factor as well, and India was empowered financially after opening up of the economy. So the author in this particular case recollects his conversation with former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. He asks a simple question to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh back then. What was the question? He asked whether whenever there is an economic prosperity that is happening, does it not lead to environmental degradation? So Prime Minister back then, Manmohan Singh, answers a simple question. He says that whenever there is an economic advantage, economic growth, growth and development in terms of the economy, the boost in the economy will generate enough amount of funds and the money, and this money eventually can be used to compensate for the environmental degradation, says former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. The author in the specific case says that such a narrative, such an idea of neoliberal environmental approach will not serve the present Indian circumstances, says the author. What are we looking at? We are looking at the neoliberal environmental approach. The author in this particular backdrop says that if we are considering that economic upgradation, economic empowerment, boost in the funds will ultimately help in the environmental upgradation, that will not work, says the author. He brings into picture one of the examples. What is it? Let's say for example, there is a rainforest. This rainforest, when you take it as an example, is a carbon sink. Huge amount of carbon emissions made in India can be sucked by this forest. But if we are depreciating, if there is deforestation, if we are taking away and rooting out the trees in this rainforest, this rooted out rainforest will not help, or the environment in the near future will not be the same, and it is the people who will be the major sufferers because of this deforestation plan, says the author in this particular case. In fact, he goes on to say that let's say there is development, let's say there is economic prosperity, and we have envisioned growth for number of years. The amount that is generated by this particular deforestation program, in fact, is not used for any of the environmental protection, says the author. Yes, we have improvised over a period of time. Yes, we have made sure that these environmental aspects are taken into picture when it comes to the policy making, but when it comes to addressing the spirit of it into the actual reality, that is not working, says the author. So the financial resources raised through the rapid growth into the environmental protection is not actually being implemented, says the author. Previously, when it comes to different governments as well, budgetary allocation has been abysmal, that in respect to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and it has dropped consistently over a period of time, says the author. The author further says that in case, let's assume that there has been an increase with respect to the budget allocation. In such a scenario, there has been inefficiencies and corruption when it comes to its execution. We have to go back to 1985. Why? Because Rajiv Gandhi ji had made a visit to Kaladi in Odisha. So during this particular visit, Rajiv Gandhi had made a statement. He says that for every rupee spent by the government, only 15 paisa reach the intended beneficiary. So such is the scale and gravity and magnitude of corruption and inefficiencies that which is prevalent in India. So in spite, or if we assume that there has been an increase in the budgetary allocation, this can also result in inefficiencies and corruption, says the author. So in spite of steady increase in the pollution, biodiversity loss, decline in the forest health and destruction of the wetlands, the amount of money which should have been either given to the environmental protection is less. Even if it is given, the utmost implementation is not happening, says the author. This is where he draws a parallel in the present scenario. All that we have spoken is with respect to the general allocation. Now he takes into picture the 2021 budget. According to the author, 2021 budget is again comparatively less to the Ministry of Environment, says the author. He takes into picture two institutes. One is the Wildlife Institute of India, the other is the Indian Council of Forest Research and Education. Both these institutes work for the environmental upgradation, research and development, understanding with respect to the biodiversity and its losses, and educating about the policy programs for the government. But in the present scenario, with respect to the 2021 budget, the author goes on to say that the budget allocation for the Wildlife Institute of India and the Indian Council of Forest Research and Education have been low and in fact have been reduced, and this ultimately means the wildlife management, the wildlife forensics, the ecotoxicology, habitat ecology and climate change research will ultimately face a loss, and as a result it is India and its environment which will face issues, says the author. Further, he goes on to say that the government, in order to compensate this particular loss, has given indirectly in some other place. What do we mean by it? Yes, the government might not have given this particular money directly to the Ministry of Environment, but it has come up with a policy change indirectly which will have a positive impact. What are the policies that will have a positive impact according to the government? He says the government has allocated about 3,500 crores for the wind and solar energy, 4,000 crores for deep ocean mission, and about 15,011 crores for urban drinking water. According to the government, they might not have been given directly to the environmental ministry, but all these programs like the wind and solar energy, deep ocean mission and urban drinking water facility will indirectly compensate for this loss, and it will help in giving a positive impact according to the government. But the author in this specific case says that this whole narrative of the government that an alternative policy will bring positive change to the environment is flawed, says the author. Let's try and understand what are the arguments of the author with respect to what he calls is a flawed approach of the government. First, he takes into picture what is called as the renewable energy sector. India, when it comes to nationally determined goals, has promised to the world that it has number of programs and schemes when it comes to the renewable energy sector. India also has what is called as the International Solar Alliance, and India has number of programs for the solar energy, for the wind energy and also for hydroelectricity generation as well. But the author in this specific case says in spite of these programs where India has promised the international global community and has its obligations, it has met its obligations in considerable period of time. But the problem is it continues to use coal mining, it continues to generate its power majorly by thermal power, that is by the use of coal, which means that it is indirectly harming the environment and polluting the environment. And in the present scenario, we also have no use or no idea of completely eliminating the fossil fuels. We do not have an alternative strategy, so we continue to use the thermal power and our entire energy basis is on fossil fuels. So this is not going to help, says the author. He takes into picture the second example of large hydropowers. What is these large hydropowers contributing to? Yes, they are generating electricity, but what is the harm that it is also creating? One such example is what we saw in the state of Uttarakhand. We have huge number of dams that we have created, we have built, but what is happening in Uttarakhand? There are certain seismic regions, there are certain delicate regions as well. This will ultimately means more the dams generating this particular hydroelectricity means that ultimately loss of property and loss of lives. So on one side, yes, we are able to reduce the emissions, but on the other side, we are constructing these hydropower electricity projects on some of the seismic active regions and at the same time some of the delicate ecosystem, which means that indirectly we are again contributing to the loss of property, loss of lives which are important for the people. The third is with respect to the massive energy parks. When we speak about energy parks, we have two in nature. One is what is called as the solar energy, the other is what is called as the wind energy. If we require solar energy or the wind energy, what we require is huge swathes of land, hectares of land coming together. So the government has to pick up this particular land from the people. So when people are giving away their lands to the government, it also means they are paying the compensation. Government is paying the compensation, no issues with that. But the problem is, where will these people go? What is the rehabilitation program? They might have their land, they might have contributed to farming as well, or they might have done something else with their lands, but now you have paid them the compensation. But what about the rehabilitation program and the livelihood means and mechanisms for the rest of their lives? So the major problem is that we require lands for all these energy parks, but the rehabilitation program for the people and the livelihood means and mechanisms is not taken into picture by the government. The fourth is with respect to the environmental impact assessments. Let's say for example, whenever there is a renewable energy program, it might be solar, it can be wind, or it can be hydroelectricity as well. Are we complying by the rules of the environmental impact assessments? Are we actually letting people to voice out their concerns? The author says in most of the cases, due to dilution of the laws, these regulations are also not met. So what is the use of impacting the alternative sections while we are actually deteriorating the whole setup of the environment with the application of renewable energy, says the author. The second important factor he brings into light is with respect to the drinking water allocations. What is it about drinking water allocations? The author here takes into picture two processes. One is what is called as the centralized approach. The second is what is called as the decentralized approach. What is this centralized approach? This is basically the top-down approach. And when it comes to decentralized approach, this is nothing but the bottom-up approach. What is this top-down approach? Let's say for example, when it comes to the top-down approach, there is something called as planning that happens at the highest level, and this is just implemented by the executing or the implementing agencies. They do not have any idea, or they might have an idea, but they do not know the root reality of what is happening when it comes to the field level. So an idea is set by the number of people according to their own factual data, but it is implemented. So when it comes to the drinking water, what exactly happens? Let's say there is a river. Let's say an example of Ganga. Ganga, let's assume, has huge amount of water. So let's say there is one area which is deserted, which does not have much of water. So according to the centralized approach of drinking water, huge pipelines are laid from Ganga, water is lifted and it is provided, water is provided to new areas. So what is happening? There is a plan, there is an executing agency, there is an implementing agency. So with the centralized approach, there is a plan that is made by the central agency or by the state agency, which is at the top cream layer, but they don't understand the root reality of the field agency. So just because there is a river, huge plains are laid, and ultimately this whole idea will be met up because of the policy initiative. Now what is this decentralized approach? This is where we take into picture what is called as the bottom-up approach. What is this bottom-up approach? Let's say for example, when it comes to the bottom-up approach, you also take into picture the perspective, the viewpoints of the people in that particular locality. So it is not only a policy where you also have the government coming and speaking to the people, but it also means people are able to give their feedback. That is what is called as bottom-up approach, where in the present scenario, when you are speaking about drinking water allocation, it is not only about centralized approach where huge pipelines are laid. Instead, what we have to focus is on the groundwater. What we have to maintain is on the rainwater harvesting. So all this will have to be taken care, and people feedback have to be taken care, and groundwater initiatives will have to be kept a check, says the author. But unfortunately, in the present scenario, we are not looking at the decentralized approach, but we are focusing heavily on the centralized approach, says the author. And finally, he says that in case people have understood the value of water, in case they are also protective about the water, they are responsible towards the consumption. In such a case, we have to incentivize those people who are using the water responsibly. So in such a scenario, we are again not incentivizing the responsible consumption, says the author. So he says the drinking water allocation again might be a flawed concept indirectly, says the author. The third is with respect to the deep ocean allocation, which is where the government has given about 4,000 crores for the deep ocean mission. What does it mean? According to the government, it says that this particular program has been initiated basically for the conservation of biodiversity where in the oceanic region. But the author in this particular case says that when it comes to the expertise who have been taking implementing this particular program, they have no idea about it or they have limited expertise. Let's say for example, we are speaking about the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research or the Department of Biotechnology or the Department of Atomic Energy. These people, yes, they have an idea about the functionalities of the ocean, but the problem is they have vague idea, but they are not expertise. They have a general viewpoint, but they do not have an objective viewpoint. In this particular case, because of the lack of expertise, deep ocean allocation program might not be successful, says the author in this particular case. So what he says is that this deep ocean allocation is indirectly looking at deep sea mining and it is not looking at biodiversity, says the author. So basically, the author goes on to conclude that this neoliberal approach towards the environment, that growth in the economy, boost in the growth and development will not contribute ultimately to the environment, says the author. So he goes on to say that developmental needs will have to go sustainably with the environmental needs is what we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says first step in the journey to universal healthcare. The author here brings into perspective what happened in Thailand and what is happening in India and how developments have to take place when it comes to the health sector in this article. First, he takes into picture how successful the program was in Thailand. He says Thailand rolled out a universal health coverage for its population. When Thailand took up this particular program, it had a long-term plan. It also had a long-term vision and it also had what is called as the institutional steps. So what are we looking at? When this particular program is taken into picture, there are three important goals that we have to look at. One is that they had a plan. So it is not only the funding that is required, but what we need is a long-term plan for this particular execution. And apart from this, they also know what should be the outcome of this particular project and who will be implementing or which institution will be implementing this particular program. So what we require is one, the funding, second is an objective or the plan, and third is the who is the implementing agency. This particular process did not happen in an ad hoc process. It was a gradual program. It was a step-by-step program. It did not happen in an ad hoc basis or it was not implemented abruptly or immediately without planning. So what they had was a vision for about 30 years, which is why they have implemented what is this universal health coverage in a successful way. That is because it was a step-by-step approach and it was not an ad hoc program. Now when it comes to India, India also requires what is called as a steady and incremental path to universal health coverage, and it should not be ad hoc or it should not be done on an urgent basis, says this article. For this particular accomplishment of India for the universal health coverage, the author again drives that it is not only the funding that is required. With the funding, what we also require is an institutional setup for the proper execution of this particular program. So in this particular backdrop, as funding is one of the important criteria, The author brings into picture the funding allocation when it comes to the budget 2021. Let's look into the budget allocation made by the finance minister when it comes to budget 2021. The Union Ministry of Health and Family Welfare budget for 2020-21 was 73,932 crore, just saw 10.2% increase over the budget estimate of 2020 and 21. So what do we see is a small increase, says the author. He further says that 64,180 crore has been given for a period of 6 years, which has been set aside under the Pradhana Mantri Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana for strengthening the health institutions. Apart from this, he goes on to say about 13,192 crores has been allocated as a finance commission grant, which according to the author is very less, and we would not be able to provide all the health issues and services, says the author. Whenever there is a drop in the funding, this will give rise to two important concerns. What are those concerns? One is with respect to the expansion of health and wellness centers without enough funding. What do we mean by it? Let's say for example, we have an hospital, or let's say for example, we require the health infrastructure. If enough amount of money is not provided to the health infrastructure or to the hospitals, the number of people whom we would be able to employ in that hospitals will be comparatively less. Doctors who live away their prosperous jobs in the city life will not be ready to move to the rural areas, and at the same time there are other complications, let's say heart issues or kidney issues or something to do with the brain as well. All this will require a complicated process. This will also require advancement in the technology and equipment as well. When funding is not provided, the ultimate problem is that we will not have the doctors, we will not have the expertise, we will not have the infrastructural development, and ultimately this means that the equipment and technology that which is required will also not be provided. And finally, when it comes to the funding, it is also required because doctors will have to be moved from the urban to the rural areas. If they are not moving, if they are not provided enough funding, we will still not be able to break the rural and the urban dichotomy, which is where the author brings into picture what is called as the health insurance program. Why health insurance program? That is because the government is not able to provide enough funding, the government is not improvising on the infrastructure, the government is not providing the equipments, and as a result it has taken through an alternative route. That alternative route is what is called as the Pradhana Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. What is this Jan Arogya Yojana? As we have discussed in the past as well, this happens to be one of the insurance program where the government of India says that it covers over 50 crore poor Indians for hospital expenses up to 5 lakh per annum. So because the government is not able to invest on the infrastructure, it has taken an alternative route that is in the form of insurance, but even that is not meeting the agenda of the health sector, says this article. How is it not meeting the health sector paradigms or its models or its implementational issues? Let me give you an example. Let's say for example, the government has what is called as an output and outcome. What is the difference between output and outcome? Let me give you two examples. Let's take the example of Swachh Bharat. What is the ultimate objective of Swachh Bharat? Is to make sure that sanitation options, sanitation facilities are provided. For the sanitation facilities, what we require is the construction of the toilets. So what exactly happens? Toilet construction happens. So according to the government, if there is increase in the construction of the toilets and if they are able to meet the numbers as prescribed by their policy, that is what is called as output. So what is output? The government has told its executive agency in a particular district that you have to construct about 1000 toilets. The executive agency has done it. That is the output. So the government is meeting the output. Or throughout India, they might have said that we require about 10 crores of toilets in all the rural and the urban areas. So you have to construct these toilets. So the executing and the implementing agencies will construct about 10 crore toilets. So it means that the government has the numbers, the executive agency is implementing, so the output of this particular project is met. But what is the difference between output and outcome? Let me give you an example. When it comes to the Swachh Bharat, the ultimate reality is that we have to meet the idea of sanitation. sanitation. But what is happening with respect to people, when there is construction of the toilets, we also have to make sure that there is water that is provided. We also have to make sure that night soil is periodically released, or there is underground UGD as well, which means that it has to be disposed in the right way. If the UGD is not present, if there is no night soil removal, or there is no water facilities, why would people use this particular toilet? So the output is just about numbers, but the outcome is about meeting the agenda. Now let me give you another example. Let's say, for example, there is a particular state where the number of crime rates are increasing. So ideally, what should be the outcome of this particular project in that particular state is to end criminal forces, is to end and make sure that it becomes a crime-free society. So what do? They do not understand why crimes are increasing, but instead they increase the number of police forces. So the state government is happy about it. Why? Because earlier they had about 1 lakh police forces. Today they might have 10 lakh forces as well, but they are still not able to control the crime in that particular state. So the outcome is not met, but instead the output is increasing. So the police officers are increasing in that particular state, but what we actually see is that it has not become a crime-free society. So the objective was crime-free society, which is the outcome, but what we actually witness is the output which is increasing, but not the outcome. Same is with respect to the insurance program in the present scenario. So what we actually see is increase in the numbers of the people who are taking the insurance program, but what is the outcome? Outcome should be that every person should have what is called as the health service provided to him, but in the present scenario, services are not provided to people, but instead there are more insurance car holders, is what the author goes on to say. So ideally, what we should look at is not only the budgeting, not only the institutions, but we have to focus on the outcome. But the outcome with respect to the insurance program, Pradhana Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, is not met, says the author. So the research into the implementational issue, understanding the root cause, and looking at primary sector with respect to the health, improvising on the health sector, is what needs to be focused on, and it is not the alternative lessons or the output or the numbers or the inflated numbers, but ultimately the objective of health to every single person, removing the disparity between the urban and the rural areas, is what needs to be focused on, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the glacial burst that we witnessed in Uttarakhand. There are two articles that we have. One is the Troubled Mountains, the other is taken from page 9 of the Hindu. Both these articles is speaking about the flood that we saw in the state of Uttarakhand. Yesterday, while we discussed this particular issue, we discussed that this was because of the glacial lake outburst flood. But the author in this particular case also says that it might be a result of the landslides as well, because there was a landslide, there was a huge glacier chunk or a major part of the glacier which fell into the river, which was dislodged into the river, and because of this is why we have seen the flood, is an other narrative put across by this article. And generally, when it comes to monitoring these lakes and the glacial lakes, who takes the responsibility? It is the Central Water Commission. So according to the article, it says the Central Water Commission monitors and prepares monthly reports on the state of glacial lakes and water bodies, that which is measuring 10 hectares and above via the satellite, because it looks into only those lakes which are more than 10 hectares. There could have been an instance where this particular glacial lake might also be small as well, and because it is small, it might have not been caught in the satellite, and as a result there could also be instances where we might have missed out on this, and ultimately this has caused what is called as the flooding, says the author. Apart from this, this particular article goes on to say that what we have is what is called as the dam construction in number of regions in Uttarakhand. These are the sensible regions, these are the sensitive regions, these are the delicate systems, these are the forested ecosystems. So while we construct dams in such an area, this can result in what is called as the renewable energy. This can result in what is called as cutting down of the carbon emissions, but indirectly it is also causing loss of lives as well. So the author in this particular case goes on to say that if we are choosing the fragile, geographically dynamic region, that will not help the humans, but indirectly it will harm the people. So whenever such hydroelectric projects or dams are constructed, they will have to be confined only to the least impacting area, or where it is not delicate enough, but in rest of the areas we should not be disturbing the forest ecosystem where it is delicate, says this article. But for the rest of the other analysis, what is the impact, what needs to be taken up, who is implementing what is the compensation, has been discussed in our yesterday's article, so kindly look into it. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about military coup that took place in Myanmar. We have discussed about this article in our last week's CNA as well. We did also discuss what should be the way forward, how it has to be tackled with reference to Myanmar in our follow-up CNAs as well. So kindly look into our last week's CNA to understand and get what this art issue is all about. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Enough money in the economy to growth is the panacea for all ills of the environment. Do you agree? Substantiate. Second question, has government spending on the health sector translated into better policy outcomes? Critically evaluate. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and also come up with some positive feedback to your friends' answers so that they are encouraged to write more on the comment section. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.